2020 Renault Kadjar, and this is a car that Renault's really going to be banking on, I reckon, as a subcompact SUV based on the Nissan Qashqai is competing in one of the hottest market segments here in Australia. And I guess Renault's thought process going into releasing this car here is that it's better late than never, because really this car should have been here quite some time ago. But it is here now. It's here to compete strongly with the rest of the competition too, given the fact this three-tiered range arrives here from under $30,000, stretching all the way up to about 38 grand for the top of the range in 10s, and sitting somewhere around 33 grand for the Zen model I have here. Now, since this is the sort of car people are actually going to buy, I figured I better give you some proper consumer information on this thing, because I'm sure you're all aware this channel's not one on which we muck about or anything like that. No, we'd never muck about here. Anyway, I figured I'd go about this by telling you some of my favourite things about this new Renault Kadjar, along with some of the things I don't like so much, to help you form your opinion if you're wanting to buy a subcompact SUV and this thing has tickled your fancy. One of the things I do like about the Kadjar is the way Renault has applied its own design language to the basic Qashqai shell, distinguishing it significantly from most angles. As a fan of the company's current design language, I think the new front and rear end styling work well here, but it's not without its flaws. From the side, the Qashqai resemblance is clear in its profile, while other Renault-Nissan Alliance links such as the odd inset Nissan X-Trail style door handle cutouts are also present. And while I'm a fan of the wheel designs, the 17-inch rims of the Zen do look tiny in these big wheel arches with so much space around them compared to the bigger 19-inch wheels of the N10s. It's not perfectly styled then, but by the class standards, it's definitely one of the best looking as far as I'm concerned. But another thing I really like is this interior, because Renault's interiors, while sometimes questionable in certain areas, do have a really nice overall design. Even though Renault's interiors kind of have some weak spots from time to time and some funky ergonomics, this one's surprisingly well thought out. It's a very sensible layout and design. Everything falls easily to hand. The only silly button placement or anything like that is the cruise control on the center console, but they've been doing that for ages, so it's hardly surprising. The materials up front are pretty nice too in this middle of the range Zen. There's quilted cloth seats with leather bolsters. The steering wheel feels pretty nice. Door cards are nice and soft too, so it's not too bad up here. I like the room that you get as well. The driving position's nice. There's a grab handle down here for the passenger for if you decide to drive like one of Renault's F1 drivers, which I'm not sure why you would in an SUV, but I think it's a pretty nice thing overall. The space in the back seat is pretty good as well. There's lots of headroom, and sitting behind myself, I do have a little bit of knee room as well, but there is one thing I don't like about the interior, and that's the fact they've cheaped out on the materials on the back doors. The plastic on the door cards is absolutely awful. It's nasty and scratchy and hard and just not very nice at all. And when you look at how good the front door cards are, you've got to wonder, well, why did you cheap out there? The lower parts of the dashboard in the front aren't that great either. It's that same scratchy plastic. And also, there is one little build quality issue I've found in this test car, and I've heard a few reports of other people finding the same issue, which is every time you go around a corner and you lean your knee against the center console, it starts to squeak a bit, which does get really annoying. But that's the only sort of build quality issue in the car. I haven't heard any other rattles or squeaks or anything like that, so it is quite disappointing that that is there. I also think the shifter looks and feels a little bit cheap, but you're not really using it all the time given that it is an automatic, so I wouldn't worry too much about that either. But moving back to one thing I do like in here, it's the screens on the dashboard here. Renault's R-Link infotainment system is nice and simple to use. It's got inbuilt sat-nav in the Zen model, although the entry-level version does not come with built-in sat-nav, but it has everything else you'd expect: Apple CarPlay, digital radio, the lot. And it's really nice and easy to use. Matte finish screen too, so it doesn't smudge up quite as easily as a glossy one. The digital gauge cluster looks really cool too. I like the layout with the central tachometer and digital speedo. The display itself is crystal clear, so I like that little touch as well. I even like these digital climate control dials as well. They're quite a funky little touch. But even though I like all these things up front, I do have some little issues with them. On the center screen, it is unfortunate that you can only have the 7-inch landscape-oriented touchscreen in the Kadjar and not the larger portrait-oriented screen that you do get in other cars like the Koleos and the Megane RS now as well. The other thing I don't like, and this is a pretty big issue, and it's one that Renault's had for quite a while, so it's a shame to see they still haven't addressed it yet. The digital speedometer in this gauge cluster is unbelievably laggy. When you give it sort of any particular amount of throttle input to accelerate forwards, it just skips through, nearly 10 numbers at a time. That's really not that great because you don't know that you're speeding until well after you've started breaking the speed limit, which is not that good for your wallet or your license. Hi MTV and welcome to my crib. I'm just kidding, of course. This is the boot of the Kadjar, which I don't fit especially well in given this low roof height relative to the flat loading boot floor, but you will fit a couple of suitcases in very easily, which I do like. What I don't like so much, this key, which you use to open it with. Now, unlike in older Renaults, there's no slot to actually put this credit card sized monstrosity into, nor is there any way to attach it to a keyring, so I'm still wondering where on earth I'm meant to keep this thing, since you won't be able to fit it in a wallet either. Who knows? Now, if there's one thing I unquestionably like about the Kadjar, it's the way that it drives. Now, part of that does come down to the Qashqai chassis that it's based on. Even though I have my issues with the Qashqai, one thing I do like is the way that it rides and handles, because it steers pretty confidently for what it is, and it does ride nicely. It's a really comfortable ride that it has, and the same can be said about the Kadjar. There might be a little bit of lean through the corners when you send it in especially hard, but the handling's pretty acceptable for a tall front-wheel drive car. The steering's nicely weighted as well. There's a little bit of feedback to it, not too much, though it is electric power steering, so what can you expect? But all in all, it does drive nicely for what it is. However, the good thing about the Kadjar is that it does pick up on the one area that the Qashqai had a bad weakness in, and that was the drivetrain, because the naturally aspirated engine that you get in the Nissan is just not that great, nor is the CVT behind it. So thankfully, the Kadjar has a 1.3 litre turbocharged Mercedes-Benz engine, and it comes from the Mercedes A-Class, and it really transforms this thing, having some turbo power under the bonnet. Although there is a little bit of turbo lag lower down in the rev range, once you really start to get on boost at around 3 grand, it pulls very healthily, especially so for an engine this small. So even though there is a little bit of a lack of displacement, it certainly makes up for it with top-end power. Thankfully, it's got a good enough transmission to harness that power as well, because it's backed by a 7-speed dual-clutch automatic that will happily shift close to red line when you try to push it hard. The other great thing about this engine as well is that it is shockingly fuel efficient. I know Renault claims about 6.3 litres per 100 Ks, I believe it is, and so far I'm getting 7 litres per 100, so I'd say their claim is pretty believable, since I am a bit of a lead foot and I haven't been going easy on this thing at all. So yeah, overall it's a really nice drive, this thing, because it's just really nice and smooth, got enough power on tap, totally acceptable in every single way. It's not going to set anyone's hair on fire driving this thing. It's not the most engaging drive in the world, but it certainly is nice. While I may have some small complaints about the Kadjar pertaining to areas of its build quality, electronics and minor styling elements, there's little to complain about when it comes to the way that it drives. Smooth, refined, efficient and pokier than you'd expect, its eager turbocharged drivetrain is what sets it apart not only from the Qashqai, but the rest of the typically underwhelming models in this class as well. Consider that it's priced incredibly reasonably given the amount of gear you're getting, and that it comes with a reassuring 5-year warranty as well. The Kadjar is not only a worthwhile, if overdue, addition to Renault's lineup, but a car that deserves a place on your shortlist as well.